Day Rambam for Monday, Beis der Chodesh Cheshvan Tavshin Pei Aleph, the first Perek of Hilchos Mila. So, over the course of the weekend, we finished Hilchos Brachas. Perek Yud of Hilchos Brachas was about Berchas Heidav, Shavach, that included all kinds of interesting brachas, interesting tefillas, all the miscellaneous ones. And Perek Yud Aleph, we learned about Berchas HaMitzvahs, and now we're advancing to Hilchos Mila. And if we recall what the Rambam wrote in his Hakdama to the whole Sefer, as I've quoted a few times, that in the Hakdama to the whole Mishnah Torah, after the Hakdama, the list of the mitzvahs, there's a section there where the Rambam summarizes each Sefer of the 14 Svarim. So what does he say about Sefer Ava? So if we recall, he said that the Sefer Sheni has all the Tedirais, all the mitzvahs that are common, that are often, that are regular mitzvahs. Those are the mitzvahs that are meant to awaken us to love Hashem. That's why it's Sefer Ava, and it continues with the theme from Sefer Ramada. So you have Kriya Shema, davening, tefillin, brachas, and then the Rambam says, and I included Mila with this group because it's a shlofishi ois b'vsareinu la'asker tamid b'shah she'ein sham loy tefillin v'loy tzitzis v'chayetze behen. Even when you have no tefillin on, no tzitzis, none of the other mitzvahs are there to remind you. You always have that ois. That always reminds you, so that's why it fits in thematically with the other halachos in Sefer Ava. So, and that means we're almost at the end of Sefer Ava. After the few prakim of Hilchos Mila, we're going to have the Seder at Tefillah, a few days. It's going to occupy us, the Rambam's Seder at the end of all the halachos, and then on to Sefer Zmanim.
So the next Sefer is the Sefer Tefillah.
At the end of Sefer Ava, there's going to be the Rambam Siddur for a few days, and then we're going to move on to Sefer Zmanim, Shabbos, etc. Now, Mila was actually mentioned, before we start Hilchos Mila, Mila was actually mentioned a few times in Hilchos Brachas. So first of all, in Perek Beis, regarding benching, it said that the second bracha, Berchas Haaretz, Al Haaretz Al Hamazayin, you have to mention Bris and Torah. It's there because it has to be there. You have to mention Bris and Torah. And Bris has to come before Torah, the Rambam said, because the Bris has 13 brises. The word Bris was mentioned 13 times in relation to the mitzvah of the Bris. And the whole Torah itself was only 3 times. Shalosh brises. So that's something that Rambam mentioned in Hilchos Brachas. Also in the last Perek, in Perek Yud Aleph, regarding Berchas HaMitzvahs, it was mentioned first, the Rambam mentioned regarding Shechiyanu, that every mitzvah that's mizman lizman, so like shofar and the whole list like that, or the mitzvah that is a kinyan, like tzitzis, etc., or a mitzvah that's not tadira, and it's not mitzuya, so it's similar, it's not so common, it's not so commonplace. So in that sense, it's actually similar to the shofar or these mitzvahs that come from time to time. What's the example that Rambam gives of this third category? Kegoin milas benoi, upidyan benoi, mavarech alav b'shas asiyah shechiyanu. So that's an example of something which is, it's not technically, it's not like a shofar that comes at a regular interval, but it comes irregularly. So in that sense, when it arrives, you're excited, you make a shechiyanu. Also in Perek Yud Aleph that I mentioned, his shita regarding the nusach brachas, right? Because some brachas we have the lashon of lehaniach, and some brachas have al something. So the Rambam came up with the shita that every mitzvah could potentially be either or. It all depends on the way the Rambam says it is. If you did it for yourself, then you say la sois. I'm doing this mitzvah. And if you did it for someone else, then it's al ha'asiyah. It's not the mitzvah for me. I'm doing it for someone else. So I'm making a mitzvah. I'm making a bracha regarding the existence of the mitzvah. So he gives examples. If you put on tefillin, lehaniach tefillin, etc. Then he gives an example. Molas benoi mevarech lamolas haben. Right? The real mitzvah is to give your own son a bris. So if you're doing the bris, you say lamolas haben. However, then the Rambam says, well, what if, let's say, instead of putting up mezuzah for yourself, you put up mezuzah for someone else? So then, according to the Rambam, then you say al kviyas mezuzah, and then the example of Mila, that goes for both. So, molas ben chaveiroi, if you gave your friend's son a bris, mevarech al hamila. So that, and all 3 of these points are going to come up again in the course of Hilchos Mila, and we'll try to elaborate when we get to them. Just wanted to...
Why is al the because you make it after.
It's a good question, but anyway, these are the 3. These are the 3 nekudas relating to Mila in Hilchos Brachas, and when we get to them again in the course of Hilchos Mila, we'll comment on them again. So Halacha Aleph. Let's first start Hilchos Mila. Mitzvah say achas. There's one mitzvah. To give the the males are bris on the 8th day. Bir mitzvah Perek Melu Perek Rishon Halacha Aleph. Mila mitzvah says shechayav aleh kares. So it's a positive commandment, and one of the rare ones where you get kares for not doing something. Shenamar v'adol zachar shel yimas b'sar alasai v'nichras ha'nefesh shahid. This is a pasuk in Parshas Lech Lecha. Pretty timely, close enough that it says clearly in the middle of Parshas Lech Lecha actually that you got the kares for not.
Because the kid is
We're going to talk about it in a moment. We're getting there. Halacha Alef, Halacha Beis together. Mitzvah ala av l'mulas b'noi v'ala rav l'mulas kol. Now, who's the mitzvah incumbent on? So it starts off as a mitzvah that the father should do. The father should give the son a bris, or the master, the owner of a slave, should give the slave, all the slaves, a bris. And he quotes again from the psukim there, Yelid bayis u'miknas kasef. So all forms of slaves, whether they were born to him, as we're going to elaborate soon, or he purchased them. So now, if this person, the father, the master, goes ahead and transgresses and doesn't do this mitzvah, so he didn't do the mitzvah, but he's not the one who gets the kares. The kares is only relevant to the person himself who is an aro, who didn't get the bris that he needed. What happens in that case? If you go ahead and do it, then based in so then based in sort of representing the community, they now have the obligation to give that child or give that slave a bris at the right time. They shouldn't allow uncircumcised people to circulate, whether it's among the Jewish community or among the slaves of the Jewish community. Now, the Kasaf Mishnah has a question here. He says in Minyan HaMitzvahs, the Rambam only wrote Lamulas Haben. It says v'tzarich tam loma leimana mitzvahs harav lamulas avdei. Just a kasha, something to think about. That's the Kasaf Mishnah's kasha.
So what happened in the case of who doesn't want to be circumcised?
Now we're going to talk about once a person grows up in halacha beis. So So we don't. If a father didn't give his son a bris, we don't sneak and give the child a bris when the father is unaware. Unless we know that he's blatantly, flagrantly, they decide he's not doing it. So then, based in then based on has a formal body, they intervene and they compel the child to get a bris, even against the wishes of the father. This alemi based in Veloy Mulaway. But what if somehow he fell through all the parents didn't take care of it, the basement didn't take care of it, and now he's an adult. So when he grows up, now finally the obligation is transferred to him. And now every day that passes, once he becomes an adult and he does not circumcise himself,
13 or 18?
I would assume 13. So he is he's not keeping the mitzvah. Where's the kares though? The Rambam says something interesting. The kares kicks in when he dies, not having given himself a bris on purpose. So the Rabbi jumps in and says, this doesn't have spice. He doesn't like it. He says, suffix. Sure, it's hard to give a hasra over here, but that's what the Shemayim are going to keep him off the hook his whole life. Years and years are passing by, and he's not chayav kares. Every day that passes, he has an isser kares. So the Kasaf Mishnah responds. The Kasaf Mishnah says, right? Because the Ravid always says, I say to the Ravid that what does kares mean when we're talking about kares? Kares means dying young, dying prematurely. So according to the Rambam, this person does not become punished with dying prematurely because he never actually transgressed the mitzvah. When you have a leisase, so the moment he transgressed it, that's the moment of transgression. Here, he didn't do it, but what moment are you going to point that and say that's the moment? He always has the ability to fix it. The second will take care of it. It'll be fine. So the only moment you know for sure that he won't take care of it is when he dies. Then you know he'll never take care of it again. And then retroactively, so then it's a kares lenefesh.
Should they give him bris after he died?
I know that's for
babies. That's a different story, but I never hear about an adult. Yeah. Inami, or you can say that same idea that the man doesn't die bekitzer shanim because that never kicks in. However, when he's going to come, it's time to die. once a person's time to die comes, apparently according to the Kesef Mishnah, it could take a nice amount of time, or it could happen 1, 2, 3. There's something called karas diyomi in Gemara. That you can have karas in days, not just karas in years. So when it comes time to die, he'll die b'kitzur yamim. Instead of taking a more reasonable amount of time, it's going to happen very abruptly, and that will be the form of karas. But again, only kicks in once it's really his time to die. Hashem says, okay, now sort of the deadline, and now we're going to punish him. Within the last few moments or days we have left, I'm going to punish him now with the karas.
Such a person doesn't form the category of tinuk shenishba because he fell through all the cracks.
But it's amazing. We said amazing. Audible amazing.
But tinuk shenishba, it stays with you. You can never be amazing.
We're talking about someone who knows what he's
He
doing.
knows what he's doing.
Sure.
But if it's we gave the example.
If it's tinuk shenishba, then he's not amazing.
He fell through all the cracks.
I just meant to say that the father didn't take care of it. The Beis Din just didn't take care of it.
Aware of the whole thing of the bris milah, what it is.
We didn't say that he was unaware. If he's unaware, that's a different story. Talking about someone who's aware. Everyone was aware.
He can never be amazing.
Why could he never be amazing? He can know, but he can grow up. No, he went to yeshiva. He learned Hilchos Mila and Rambam.
Can never be amazing.
Oh, in that case, sure.
Sure.
Yeah, just like anything else, yeah. No different. And then then he says, what about the Ravid? What does the Ravid hold? So the Ravid must hold that from the moment that he becomes an adult and he doesn't get a bris, so the first day that passes and he didn't do a bris, from that moment already, he's chayav lamas b'kitzur shanim. There's this karas hanging over his head. And it's in reverse. If he's going to give himself a bris milah, then he'll revoke the karas. It's the only karas that you can remove by just doing something. But the karas is there the whole time, according to the Ravid. A different model of how you look at it. Every day, that's what he said. The choyim emet b'isur karas. The choyim is roi. He can be struck down by this karas. Even though obviously it's its own unique category, but that's how the Ravid understands it. And then he goes into what did the Ravid mean by Hesra Safek. You can look in the Kesef Mishnah for more on that. All right. Halacha Gimel. So now we get into interesting details relating to slave ownership and what day the slave should get bris. Halacha Gimel Echad Eved Shenoil B'Reshus Yisrael Echad Eved Hanilkach Min HaGoyim. So whether he was born in the Jewish property or he was purchased, as we said earlier from the pasuk, Yilud Boyus Mikna Kasef. They both have the same obligation. The master has to give them a bris. Ella, there is a difference. If he was born to slaves and maids that are already his property, so then you wait the normal 8 days. However, if he purchases the slave, then he gets the bris the day he purchases them. Even if he buys a 1-day-old baby, in that case, unusually, the chiyuv would be chal that day immediately. You don't wait 8 days for a slave that was purchased at 1 day old.
Isn't that a second?
Apparently, not so much. I think the doctors in the hospitals who do circumcision, I don't think they wait 8 days. They wait longer. You think? I don't know.
No, the hospital circumcisions they ask the parent if they want it.
But I think they might do it right away.
Days,
Yeah, they don't wait 8 days.
Can do a circumcision the first day after he's born.
Apparently, if we're saying that you should, then apparently, for an Eved who was purchased on the day he was born, or within, whenever you purchase him, even on the day he was born. That's Halacha Gimel. Then there's some interesting twists on this. Halacha Dalet, Yesh Miknas Kasef Shenimel L'Shmeina. You can have the reverse. You purchased the slave with money, and you dafka wait 8 days. Yesh Lid Bias, and then there's one who was born to you, Shenimel B'Yem Shivol, who got the bris the day he was born. How do we turn that on upside down? Like this. Ketzad, the first case. Lokach Shivcha v'Lokach Ubara Ima. He paid for a maid. When he paid for the maid, it was understood that the maid was pregnant, and extra money was put down with the understanding that she's pregnant. There's more value here. There's a child. So he paid for both. The Yolda. So technically, it was born. 1 second. The Yolda Harez Nimo Lishmaina. Now technically, he paid for him. So we said before, if you pay for the child, you give him the bris right away. But over here, he paid for the child before he was born. So even though he paid, so really it should be the day of. Because he bought the mother before she gave birth, so from the mother's perspective, this is a yilid bias. From the child's perspective, this is a mikna kasef. But from the mother's perspective, it's yilid bias. So we go with that. We say he purchased the mother. This is a child of that mother. So as a child of that mother, nimo l'shmeina, he gets the bris on the 8th day like a Yilid bias, even though we call him a Miknas Kasef because we paid for him. Now, what about the reverse? Halacha hey, lokach shufcha l'ubareh. What if he only paid for the children? He didn't pay for the maid. He only bought her because she's a childbearing woman, but he didn't need her services personally. Or he purchased a maid, and with a t'nai that he's not going to let her. She's not going to toivel to have this exact status of an eved, of a shifcha. So in that case, even though the child was born in his rishus, so we're calling it a yilid bias, but nimar b'yom sheyavaled, but really it's really a miknas kasef, so he really gets the bris the day he was born. Because there's no mother in the picture. The mother has to be a maid, and then her child gets a bris on the 8th day. But here the mother's not in the picture, either because he didn't pay for her, or he didn't want to give her the status of a shifcha. So even though she was in his property technically, but she wasn't really his property. So miknas kasef levadai, ayem kanohu. It's as if he just bought him the day he was born. She's not in the status of a shifchas yisrael to give the child a real status of yilid bias. So even though we call them yilid bias, is really mikna kasef. However, if she goes and toivels after she gives birth, then the status changes. Then we consider him again the child of a shifcha, and then his status changes back to 8 days. Okay, interesting halachas. Halacha vav. Lokach eved gadol min hagoyim. Now we're talking about buying a slave who's an adult.
So the shifcha is a yid. That means there's no all these complications don't come in.
I'm a Havriya.
I'm
a Havriya. That's a totally different.
No, you're not talking about not being free.
I'm saying
also, a Havriya isn't married, and if she's who's she married to? The other, then she's not an Amma. She's not an Amma anymore. It's no. Halacha vav. Lokach eved gadol min hagoyim. Let's say you buy an adult slave, non-Jewish slave, and he refuses. Apparently, we give him some leeway here to say yes or no. So if he refuses, so we let it hang. We hang out with him for 12 months. That's how long we can let this thing pend. More than 12 months, you can't keep him as a slave, as an adult. So what are you going to do? You have to sell him back. However, if they made a condition to begin with when he was still by his non-Jewish master, so he won't get a bris, then so you are, like we mentioned in the last halacha, apparently you are able to create an evidence shifcha, don't fit into the exact halachic status of an evidence shifcha. They can, there's a workaround. But no matter what, whether he's full evidence or not, he has to accept Sheva mitzvahs. And then he gets the status of a ger toshav / slave. According to the Rambam, if he refuses to get Sheva mitzvahs, doesn't matter what the other details are. You got to kill him right away, because you got to kill technically anyone who doesn't keep Sheva mitzvahs. Then the Rambam adds, we don't have a ger toshav except when we have yovel. So what if you have a slave today? Oh, so the Ravid comments on that. So the Ravid says, kill him right away. Yimachar miyad. Sell him right away. We can't kill anyone now. That's the Ravid jumps in and says. The Kesef Mishnah says, I don't understand what the Ravid wants. It says, Shahuz al Kasav Divrei HaGemara. The Rambam is looking at what the Gemara says, and he writes it down. If we don't have the ability to implement the laws of the Gemara, so the Rambam shouldn't write the halacha. The Rambam's doing his thing. He says, that you shouldn't say that. Even Bisman Hazeh, when you can't kill him. So Megalgal, Ima Yud Beis Chodesh, all the things we just said. So then you can keep him in the end if he doesn't keep Sheva mitzvahs. Maybe when we said that Mutter Lekaima with Sheva mitzvahs, and if not, then kill him. Maybe it was Manazeh, you can keep him without the Sheva mitzvahs. Because we can't kill him, so if he doesn't want to accept the Sheva mitzvahs, so then you have to sell him right away. But it sounds like you could have a slave nowadays, technically. It wouldn't be, I guess, you wouldn't have the full status of a ger toshav, but if he's keeping Sheva mitzvahs, should be fine. Why do we care if he's fully a ger toshav or not? Now, regarding ger toshav, we already touched on the ger toshav back in Hilchos Perek Yod when we discussed Leis Chanim. I'll mention just a little bit what we said over there. Rambam mentioned about it's also to heal idolaters, people who are Avodah Zarah. But then he says ger toshav, because we are supposed to keep him alive, so heal him bechinam. if you're chayshish mishameva for every the zara, you can't heal him for free. Only for b'schar. Ger Teishav, you can treat him like a yid. You can even heal him for free. That was one thing I mentioned about a Ger Teishav. Another thing I mentioned there was about Mount Neschinam. You can't give a guy just a gift. You can give a Ger Teishav. And then at the end of the Perek, the Rambam said that all the details about dealing with the Goyim or what you could do or can't do, the assumption being that we don't have full control, so we have to figure out what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. Can you sell? Can you not sell? Can you give a gift? Can you not give a gift? But Bisman Sheyad Yisrael Takifa, so then we can't allow a Goy of the Zara to live among us at all. Until he gets Shem Mitzvahs. If he gets the Shem Mitzvahs, he's a Ger Teishav, and then Amen Zov, Emakam Ger Teishav, all Bisman Shayevel Naeg, only when the Yevel is in place, with no Yevel, which is nowadays. So you can't. You only have a Ger Tzedek. We mentioned then about the whole controversy of the Heter Mechira in Eretz Yisrael since the 1880s. The question of can you sell property, land in Eretz Yisrael during Shemitah to sidestep the Hilchos Shemitah. So the problem being that if you sell it to a guy, then you're being over and leisachanim because you're selling property in Eretz Yisrael to a guy. Now you could sell it to a Ger Teishav, but there's no Ger Teishav nowadays. And some people try to tie into that. Maybe technically you could consider someone a Ger Teishav to a certain extent. That was a big. That was at the center of the controversy. How do you get around that conundrum? You want to sell it, but then you're selling it to a guy. There's no Ger Teishav. We also mentioned that even though the Rambam just says there's no Ger Teishav, but that's just legabe specific technical halachas, but the Rebbe, of course, made a big deal out of the fact that there's still significance to accepting the Shav Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, even if it doesn't translate into being accepted as a Ger Teishav, it's still significant and meaningful. We still want the Rebbe was Medayik from the Rambam. That's what we're still advocating for. Moving on to Mila. If you have an Eved,
No, someone who takes upon himself Shem Mitzvahs.
Well, he wouldn't need one. Either he's a ger or he's an Eved. If he's a ger, he's a ger. If he's an Eved, you can still give him Mila to an Eved. All those halachas are still relevant.
The Ger Teishav doesn't have to have this Mila.
No, unless he's an Eved.
No, Ger Teishav.
Yeah,
It's not an Eved.
but we said an Eved is a Ger Teishav, so that's the Eved has a special get. He's like an Isha, and he has Mila, and he's a Ger Teishav. It's like a mix of halachas there, but a regular Ger Teishav.
It's going to be Yoibo, plain Ger Teishav.
No.
No, he does not have to have this Mila.
Correct. Yes. Halacha Zayin. Ger shenichnas lekal Yisrael. Now moving on from adult slaves to a ger. You have a convert, proselyte, so he's converting. Chayav Mila Tchila. He needs a bris Mila first, among other things. And what if he was already circumcised as a guy? It happens. Sarach lahat menu dam bris ksheis gayer. So you need a toughest dam bris. You need a cut. Maybe get some blood. Let some blood. Yeah. And the same goes for a Jewish child who's born without an orla. Happens. So on the 8th day, you cut a little bit and let some blood.
Also for Goy did the bris Mila.
Mm-hmm.
You have to
Okay.
you have to deep us down.
Right. Androgenous. So Rambam reminds us what's an androgenous. He has both semanim, male and female. We mentioned already in Hilchos Avei Dezara Perek Beis when it came to dress, peyas harosh and klei gaver, klei isha. We elaborated on it a bit more over there. So tzarech lo mulei sei b'shmini also on the 8th day. V'chein yetzi day from the mishi yesh li shtei harolas, and someone who was born through cesarean section, or someone who has two harolas for some reason. So mo neshtain b'shmini. So it's all on the 8th day.
What would you think cesarean not?
Face, just letting you know. Now, Benegea, the details in this halach and the Rambam. So I just want to mention two things from the Rebbe. The Rebbe is talking about the idea how the bris Mila is both a general thing and a specific thing. There's a specific mitzvah of bris, and then bris is a very general, all-encompassing thing that connects bris, a yid, between a yid and Hashem. So the Rebbe says we find this at Gosha by the Mila of a ger. You have the Inyan Kloli of Mila that it's bringing him into Kedushas Yisrael, and then you have the technical mitzvah. He's doing a mitzvah of Mila. But there you see Mamish how besides the technical mitzvah of Mila that he's doing, he's going to do all the mitzvahs soon. But you see how the mitzvah of Mila, Mamish creates the bris, creates the compact, the pact between him and Hashem. That's how he enters. So you see that concept a lot more clearly when it comes to a ger. Another point that comes up in relation to this halacha, because the Rebbe is referring to the three. The Rebbe mentions it a lot of places in the Ragat Shavah. The three details in Mila: you should be mohel, and you shouldn't be an adol, and then it's just the mitzvah of Mila. The pu'ula of Mila, without that, you should be mohel, you shouldn't be an adol. Right. The Rebbe says when the nafka mina halacha is that someone who's born mohel, so he is mohel, he's not an adol. And yet we still say that he should do the mitzvah. So you see that there's the pu'ulas hamila, etzem pu'ulas hamila. Quotes in the Ragat Shavah on this halacha, Hilchos Mila, Perek halacha zayin, that you see from the Rambam that katan shnei l'kshu mohol, it's rak mishum gedem. It's not mishum safik orla kavusha. It's not a maybe there's an orla in his skin and it's just not visible. So really he is an orla, just we can't see it. No. It's just mishum geder mitzvah. How do we see this? He says, in Hilchos Trumas, the Rambam says that mutter lechel b'truma im noilad mohel. You can eat truma if he's born mohel. So for practical purposes, we consider him a full mohel. We don't consider him a safek adol. Afal pikein, you need a tafas dam bris. That proves that it's mamish just a geder mitzvah, not for any pu'ula in the person himself. Maybe that connects the idea with the bris shel Avram Avinu. Just to be in the bris shel Avram Avinu, you need to do the pu'ula beyond the physical component. All right. Now to continue in the Perek halacha ches. Ein mo'el la'olam is man. What time? Ein mo'el la'olam el b'yom achar aleis hashemesh. So you can't do it by night. You have to wait sure after alois. Bein b'yom hashmini shu zmana, bein b'shalei b'zmana shu mitzvah. It doesn't matter whether it's the 8th day. It's not like, the 8th day doesn't begin until the sun comes up, but maybe once the 8th day passes, then you can do it day and night. No. Even if it's the 9th day, etc. It always has to be by day and not by night. Shnamar, u'bayom hashmini, b'yom elei b'layla, day not night. Be'emol mishal amud hashachar, kosher. So, Aleis Hashemesh is really what we call nets. Hanetz hachama, that the sun actually, which is just the light without the sun, it's kosher. Cholayim kosher lamila, all day, starting from the morning, but throughout the day is okay. Alva became mitzvah but ideal to do it in the beginning. Zrizin makdimin lamitzvahs. You always try to do things as early and as fast as possible. Of course, you have the whole pilpul about what Bereiv Hadras Melach. I didn't have a chance to look it up, but I recall it would have been nice to have looked it up. That I think Leibele Eger, Kiva Eger's grandson, who was Niskar of Chassidus, to Kotsk. I think there was a whole controversy relating to this. I think it may have even been relating specifically to Mila. That he waited till the end of the day, and it became a whole controversy, and a lot of Rabbanim weighed in. The Tshuvas have been printed, but that's for another time. Halacha tes. Mila bezmana doicha es hashabbos. So if the Mila is being done on time, then it trumps Shabbos. You do it and you ignore the Shabbos. Shalei bezmana eino doicha es hashabbos v'lo es yom. But if it's not the 8th day, then Shabbos yom come first. You have to wait till afterwards. And no matter what time you're doing it, it always trumps teras. If the teras is literally on the arla, that's it. Usually you don't have to cut off the teras, but here you're allowed to because it's on the arla. So here's the rule that an asay is deicha. Halacha yod kashem shemilas habonim deicha as Hashabbos. The idea that a Mila on the 8th day pushes off Shabbos isn't only true for children, but even for slaves. If their halach is, if their category is, their Yelid bias, and you're doing it on the 8th day, it's Deicha Shabbos. Chutz mi Yelid bias, shaloi tov le'imei ad sheyolda, that case from halacha hey, where she toiveled after, then that's one case where we don't. Okay. What if the child is born already with the bris, like we mentioned earlier? And someone who was born in the 8th month, which means he's premature, and you can see it literally, as Ram is going to say in a bit, in Allah Gimel, that the child is born, you can see he is premature. So we treat him like a miscarriage because he's not going to survive. So that's the second example. Or someone who's a cesarean section, but androgynous, they do not push off the Shabbos. They wait till the next day, Sunday, which is their 9th day.
Premature kid, they could be born as much as 6 months. They keep them in incubation,
Right.
Then so that would be
But they're probably not getting a bris on the 8th day either.
But I'm saying the kid is not considered. I'm saying in
Those days, the child didn't look healthy. But there was nothing they could do about it, so they might have just gone ahead and should we do the bris anyway? So that's what we're saying. You're not getting anything. He's not going to live anyway. So why be doicha the Shabbos? But if you thought the child had a chance of surviving, chances are I don't think you would be doing anything. You'd after doing it because you don't think he has a chance in a way. I think Allah Yud Beis. Mishanel ben Hashmashes, someone who's born around now. Savik Bayim, Savik Balayla. You're not sure if it's day or night. Mainim min alayla. So we assume that we should start counting from the nighttime. Nimo Batshi Shu Savik Shmini. So that means that's the 9th day, which is maybe the 8th day. Erev Shabbos ben Hashmashes. So if he's born Friday ben Hashmashes, so now you can't give him a bris on Friday because you have to count from the night, and you don't give him a bris on Shabbos. Any deiches Shabbos because it's a suffix, so it's not deiches Shabbos. Animo be'achad b'Shabbos, so he gets pushed off already to Sunday. And deiches Shabbos misafik. A suffix doesn't push off Shabbos. Loch Yud Gimel Mishnel b'Chedesh Hashmini. Back to he was born in the 8th month. If the evidence shows, you look at him and it looks like he's fully developed. Harez of Vlad Shalim. So then we say, oh, this is not the nefil we were talking about. So in terms of 7, 8, and 9, we'll call him Uben Shiva Hu Elashan Ashtaha. This is a child who was really he was ready to be born in the 7th month, and he just took some time. So the definition of a Ben Shemaina is the assumption was he was only going to be ready in the 9th month, and he was born prematurely. Or then you have the opposite, someone who's ready in the 7th month, and then wherever he's born, he's born. So Mutla Talta B'Shabbos Veinik Heaven, so you can carry him on Shabbos, you don't treat him like a stone, which is the opposite of what we're going to say in a second. For someone who is Neifel, Umayel and Esa B'Shabbos, you can give him a bris on Shabbos, the 8th month, it doesn't matter. You follow the Metzias, you look at the child. But if you see that the hair is wrong, the nails are wrong, you see he's like half baked. He wasn't ready to be born. Hareza ben Shmoina Vadai. So then we say, okay, this is for sure an 8-monther. He was only going to be ready. He was only be mature in the 9th month. He was born prematurely, and in those days there was nothing you could do about it. So we treat him like a rock. To carry him. But we don't even treat him like as having the value of a living being. Alpha became still. I'm shocked. If you left him around for 30 days, you treated him like a rock, and somehow he made it. So then I guess he'll make it. Suddenly he reverts, and now he's like a normal kid like anyone else. If you last 30 days in an you're already not in nefil territory. He might still be unhealthy, but he's not in nefil. Halacha Yudalid. If someone was born in the 7th month, if he's clearly okay, so he's fine. Savik ben Shiva, Savik ben Shemaina, Nimel b'Shabbos b'Kohen. What if you're not sure if he's a 7 or an 8? Then you can give a bris on Shabbos no matter what. If he's 7 and he's fine, then he should be doing Shabbos. He's healthy. And if he's not okay, this is not really truly an act of Mila. It's like slicing flesh. Because he's not really a living being. He's not going to make it. So that wouldn't be the Mila that's problematic on Shabbos. So you can do it no matter what. Halacha Tezvav. What if he wasn't fully born ben Hashmashes? He was only born, he stuck his head out, his head emerged. So even though he was only fully born when it was properly night, we don't say, oh, so now he's a Shabbos born. No, you still say he's a ben Hashmashes, so he's a suffix. So technically he's still maybe Friday, maybe Shabbos, so then you can't give him a bris on Shabbos because he's a suffix. Now the Rambam says, So if you're not Doicha Shabbos, you also are not Doicha the first day of Yom Tov. But Doicha is Yom Tov Sheni, but you are Doicha the second day of Yom Tov. Even for those who observe 2 days. However, Hashanah which has 2 days, ain't a Doicha Leis, Rishim Leis Hasheni, because there the second day is different. But Chem Mila Shlei Bezmana, ain't a Doicha Sheni Shal Resh Hashanah. Chol Mila Shlei Bezmana. Halachat Hazayin. Chayla. The idea, this is just, this is very common nowadays. It's a child who's unwell, and you don't give him a bris until he recovers. And when he recovers, you don't give a bris right away. Then you start counting 7 days, 7 full days, and then you give him a bris. When do we count 7 days? He had a fever, something like that. So after a fever, you wait a week. But if he just had his eyes were hurting, when the eyes clear up and heal, you can give him a bris right away. Anything like that. A child who's very yellow. Yarek in halacha very often means yellow.
Jaundice.
Yeah, jaundiced. So we don't give him a bris until the colors revert to normal. You have different, I think today you still have different moyalim, different communities have different traditions, standards of, to what extent or how long they wait. But I'm just saying in general terms. Yeah. If he's very red, he almost looks like he was painted. Until the blood is reabsorbed into the body, whatever it is, until he has a normal appearance. This is also a problem with the blood. You have to be very careful. And you don't give a bris to that child unless he's not described as sick in any way. Because that's more important than everything else. There's always later for a bris. You can never retrieve a person who died who wasn't supposed to die.
It's interesting when the psak is coming from the doctor.
Right, yeah.
It's a whole different...
Right, for sure. Halacha Yudches, the final halacha, Isha Shemala Benar Yisha Nemes Machmas Mila, and we'll see in a moment why I mentioned the woman. The woman gave her first child a bris, and he died due to the Mila. He bled out. Shechshilas Kaychai. I mean, if he bled out, here Rambam just makes it sound like he lost his kayach. It did him in. The same for the second. So it doesn't go by them, it goes by the woman. So whether it's the different husbands, it goes according to the woman. So you shouldn't give the third bris right away. We assume that it's just a matter of his stamina or whatever it is. You wait till he gets a little stronger, and then you give him a bris.
Shkech.